You've on the 11:45 as well.
It is about that time. So for those of you who are coming on my tour, I wanted to get started with a little bit of safety information just so you know what to expect as we go through the mine. We're going to go down this long staircase here, and then we will take a walk through the mine that's about 100 yards. Over the course of that walk, we get as deep below ground as 75 feet. So the footing is steep. We slope down into the bottom and then come back up, and it's steep both ways. There are some very low ceilings as well. The shortest ceilings are only 4 feet high, so we're going to be crouching down like this to get through some spots. If anyone's uncomfortable, you don't have to do the whole thing. Just let me know how it's going for you. You can bail at any point. You're not forced to be here. It is wet, dripping from the ceiling, and dimly lit in the mine. So that's what we're up against. Is everybody ready to go?
Yep.
Fabulous. You can follow me down.
To do it. How do you do it?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Usually it's not quite this dark, but it's very hard to keep the lights on down here, as you might imagine. We have an electrician coming soon, but very challenging. So welcome to the mine. Is this everyone's first visit here?
No, I've been here before.
Cool, cool. Welcome back. Glad to have you. If anyone has any questions, my name is Abigail. You can just say, hello, question, and I'd be happy to answer it. So we're going to start here, get a little acclimated to the dark, and then we'll get going through the mine. So this is the oldest part of this property. In 1707 is when they got started here, and the colonists were very interested in getting involved in industry, having a different type of work than farming. So it was very appealing to them to get involved in establishing a mine. And they learned from Native Americans that copper could be found here. So they were very gung-ho. They were excited to get involved in that kind of industry building. So they dug down in here. The very first part that they dug was behind you. That was the original entrance. The way that we came down wasn't built until the 1970s. But it would have been a ladder in that corner over there, and then everything else was dug out following the vein of copper in the ground. So it slopes down following the way that the copper is deposited on that slant. We can see an example of that over here. So as you can see, this green layer is the copper ore, and it just goes through the whole mine, and everything that's dug out, all these tunnels, were just dug out following that. So that's what they were looking for. It comes out of the ground, looking like this. You have all these, copper-bearing rocks that have to be processed. The way that you turn this into copper metal is by grinding it all down and then heating it up very hot to actually separate out the useful copper metal. This is a difficult process. They didn't really have the capacity for it in the colonies, so this was being shipped to England to actually be turned into copper metal. And while this place was running as a mine, it wasn't profitable, wasn't successful. It was too hard, too much, too difficult. It wasn't going to be successful, and people were constantly selling off their stake in the mine to someone else and trying to get out of it. So eventually the mine is just fully abandoned, and it's just empty tunnels. And that's around 1750s that this place is abandoned. Any questions about the mining?
No.
Righty.
So how long have it been open then?
How long was it running as a mine?
Yeah.
From about 1707 into the 1750s, kind of off and on, just depending on how many people wanted to hire the laborers to actually be working here. And then later there were some other mining attempts, but that was after the prison years. So mining until the 1750s, closed for about 20 years, then prisoners are housed down here, but not mining, just housed. So this place is operating as a prison, and then closes down in 1827, and then there's a couple more mining companies in the middle of the 1800s who come, and then they're like, oh, we have modern technology, we're gonna do it better. They did not do it better, it was not better, and they closed really quickly.
So what particular prisoners would have been kept here?
What, sorry?
What particular prisoners?
Not very serious
Offenders.
Typically, mostly property crimes, so stealing horses, like burglary, these kinds of things, because very serious crimes would have been punished with death. So you wouldn't have been coming here.
So if they were down here as a prisoner, how long would they be down here for?
Sentences varied. from 6 months to a couple of years. There weren't very many long sentences like you see today, but still a very unfortunate place to spend that time. They would have been down here for 12 hours a day, so they would have been down here to sleep. There would have been cabins constructed here, and then during the day they were brought above ground to work in workshops, making products that could be sold. Good questions. Let's get scooting. Really watch your step as we go. Be very cautious. This is our first low spot. Watch your head. Really low. Careful, careful. So grab a spot to stand that feels comfortable. We're going to talk about this feature next to me. This was a well once upon a time. So this was dug out in 1776 after the prison has opened because enough people are living here that they need easy access to water. So this was a well, has since been filled in, but this would have been where they were able to draw water every day, both for drinking, using, for the various industries that they had. So one of the jobs that the prisoners could do was making nails, so they needed water to cool the nails and all that. So if you want to imagine for a second being a person who's incarcerated here before the invention of electricity, you're down here in darkness. And this would have been one of your few ways of having a little bit of light, just a little bit, and it would have been covered over so that they wouldn't climb out, right? So just a little bit of light here. One of the other ways that they would try to make light would be by saving fat scraps from their food and trying to burn those. So definitely necessity is the mother of invention, that kind of thinking for sure. Any thoughts about the well? Or any other questions come to mind?
No.
This was a very challenging place to be incarcerated, and people at the time knew that this was inhumane. So it's sort of easy to look back and say, like, they didn't know any better, like, they were just, this is what it was like back then. They knew and they were criticized pretty quickly for operating a place like this, but they wanted it to be cheap and easy. They thought, we have these abandoned time tunnels. We can use it, we can repurpose it, we can, find a way of making this work for us. But it was in fact very expensive to run this place as a prison because they were constantly trying to add new infrastructure to the site, especially the workshops, and eventually they built a cell block. Once they decided they could no longer house people down here, they built a big cell block, and that was where they were going to house them. So those things were very expensive, and it would have been better to build the facility in the first place than to just try and cobble this together for many years. But it is, colonial thought, like how they were trying to make it work for them. We're not going to go into the solitary confinement chamber because it is very wet. We would be in water up to our ankles. But there was a solitary confinement chamber that was hollowed out over to the side there. And it's just a round room, just carved into the rock, where a prisoner would be chained as punishment. I think one thing that could get you sent in there is if you had tried to escape, that could be a punishment. Inciting violence, that kind of thing, could get you chained in there. Yeah, very, very bad place to do time.
Yeah, no, I'm just wondering if it acted as a deterrent at any point,
Not then and not now either.
Yeah.
Deterrence is not real.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think that the crux of punishment is that it makes the rest of society feel better.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's what it all comes down to,
Gotcha.
unfortunately. I'm going to scoot through you. I'm very sorry to just talk through this in here. Careful, careful as you go down. So yeah, then and now deterrence is a little bit of a fantasy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Patty, you're on your own. I'm done.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I get the gist of it.
All right. Thanks very much for coming.
One chicken.
It's all right. Adults have a hard time with the closed space down here. Kids usually are very gung ho.
There's a lot of water coming down. I'm surprised because you're on a height of
We are about to talk about that, so good point.
yeah,
Yes. It's always wet in the spring because of the snow melt.
yeah,
The water is very slowly soaking through the ground and continues year round. It's always a little bit wet here. And surprisingly, the water table is quite high right here, and you can actually see it there. So about 80 feet below ground, around 80 feet below ground here is where the water starts. And you can see, if you look down this tunnel, that's water, that's where it is.
oh yeah. And then where does it go to finally?
Where does it go?
Yeah, is it run into a river? It has to have a way out somewhere.
As far as I know, it's just groundwater. It's not running anywhere. There's some drainage has been dug out of here to keep it as dry as it is.
Yeah,
But I don't know.
yeah, it can't be blocked. It has to find its way through, right?
I don't know.
Uh,
I don't know. I guess I should learn more about the
Yeah, it
geology
has to have a
of
way
it.
out. It has to be coming down and straight out somewhere. It has to be leading to down a mountain somewhere.
Well, I will show you a way that some water does escape as we get through here. But this is just still. It's not running as far as I know.
There's mines near me back home, and there's pumps constantly running to keep the water out. Otherwise,
Yeah.
the mines flood.
Right.
So that obviously has a way out. It has to go somewhere.
I think so. When the miners were digging, up until this point, it stayed dry. And then once they got to here to continue digging, they did have additional workers who were
Yeah.
pumping water to actually
Yeah.
dig out that tunnel like that. So at that time, they were, pumping it out as they went. And then once all the work stopped, it filled back up to this point, and
Yeah.
that's about as full as it gets.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool. Though.
So go really cautiously. We have this low tunnel here. This is the 4-foot high tunnel. Don't stand up too soon on the other end.
That's all right.
Excellent, excellent. This is as deep as we go, so from here we're going to start climbing back out. And here's a great spot to look for copper. So behind you here, very beautiful, very green here. It comes up and over the top, like in this area. You love to see it. And then if you look down this tunnel, you can see back there it's like sandwiched super clearly between the other layers of the rock. You can see the green on the right-hand wall. It's just right in between right there. Also at this point we have a lot of tool marks. So in this wall you can see a lot of evidence of the work. Sorry, I'm like all over the place. So this is a good example here. You can see they would drill out holes and then blast. So that's one way that they would make progress through the mine. So as we go, you can see this in lots of spots. This is a good one. You can do a good job blasting that one up. So at this point, we can see a couple of different things. There's a drainage tunnel that goes out underneath these stairs, and that was dug by the miners. It was dug by one team from the inside and one team from the outside, both, digging into the rock. It's a little easier to see if you go over there, actually. If you look on the other side of the stairs, you can see it pretty well. But the light is out because it's so wet. And then above us, there you see a staircase, and that was the original ore shaft. So the miners were down here digging out all this copper ore, and they would haul it out through, this is a 75-foot shaft, and they would haul it there on ropes. So that's how they would get it all out. Tremendously hard work, all done by hand. I do think that maybe they would have had oxen to haul the ore out, so that would have been, something, but hand labor is very difficult work. And very, low tech for the colonial time.
That's when people really worked hard back in the day.
Yeah, and it was appealing to them, I think, especially for colonists. You have farming, or you have these other kinds of risky ventures to try and get involved in, but you don't have, the different professional types of jobs that we have today. It was very much like, what type of labor am I going to break my body with? Very hard. Any other thoughts or questions?
No, I'm good.
When this place was running as a prison, the prisoners would have largely been down here unsupervised, trying to, learn from each other, definitely inciting some rebellion, and this place is not a very secure prison. There are definitely lots of escapes, especially from like-minded groups amongst the incarcerated folks, especially during the Revolutionary War. Loyalists were kept here for being loyalists, not even like combatants, just being sympathizers, that kind of thing, or combatants too. But the biggest and most successful escape was organized by loyalists, who all banded together, and I believe 26 of them scooted on out of here. Yeah, very dramatic.
I want to get out of here myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. It's really hard to imagine, but when you're actually in the place, you do, I don't know, I'm here a lot, and just thinking about what it must have been like to be kept down here. Yeah.
There must have I got sick a lot down here with damp and whatever and died.
There were some cases of tuberculosis getting spread around, but not as many respiratory illnesses as you might expect. The other thing that was bad is they would always be shackled at the ankles, and they would get infections from the metal rubbing the skin. So that's the other thing. But not as many deaths as you would expect. And from the reports, which we have to take with a grain of salt, right? These official reports that, the people running the prison want to say, we're doing a great job. From the reports, it does not seem that the prisoners were any sicker than average people. One of the reasons for that may be that they were sort of separated from society, so you're not getting, bad fevers or flus or anything passing through. But very much a mixed bag. This is not a healthy environment, but you are separated from, certain outbreaks of disease. Their diets were very poor, so that's one of the problems that they had, was it was very hard to get fresh food here. So they would eat a lot of like salted pork and sort of that kind of thing. But from the archaeological evidence, we can tell that the prisoners were not fed enough because of the way that the bones were processed to death. So you have the prisoners would eat the meat off of the bones, then crack the bones open to get the marrow out, and then boil the bones to try and get, the little bit of extra, gelatin, I guess, out of the bones to try and have a little bit more calories. So we know that they were starving. Yeah. Bad. In a nutshell. Bad. Any other thoughts?
No? Okay.
Very good. In this area, we can see a couple more interesting things. So even though this is an awkward spot to stand, tool marks. You can see those holes drilled behind us in the wall. So we can tell that this is the way that they dug this tunnel. This is the direction that they came in to blast that all out. I don't want to run up against this little group. I keep doing
What
this.
is that one?
So I think as they dug, they just had to stack the rocks somehow to get them out of the way. Some of the rocks would have been hauled all the way above ground, and that's why it's so hilly in our specific property, because it's just the leftover rubble is all there. So we have this very odd terrain. It's why the buildings aren't that stable. It's why we had to have a really big construction project on the guardhouse. That was a couple of years ago now, but yep, stacked rocks. Oh, this I wanted to point out. This would have been a doorway, I guess, I don't know, because we can see a hinge here.
Oh yeah.
So, when is it from? I don't know. It looks like it was burned. I don't know. Just these little interesting features that, add to the story, but we don't really know what they mean. You can take a look at it if you want. You can continue on. If you have a question, feel free to jump in. Low tunnels, but not because people were short, just because it was important to work efficiently. You're just digging out that very narrow vein of copper. Almost every group I get is like, why were people so short back then? They weren't.
They're not going to dig unnecessarily.
Right. You just have to get it open enough to get on through. So there's a couple of miles worth of tunnels in this mine. This mine does not connect to any other mine in the area, so it's not like sprawling, it's very contained. But there are a couple of other mines that are from around the same time period, although this is the oldest. The most successful, like the best mine in the area, was the Higley copper mine. That was about 1.5 miles south of here, and they, out of that mine, made the first colonial currency. They were not allowed to, but they certainly were making coins. And those are very valuable today, the Higley coppers. Yeah.
You want to know a lot of people, they have to stop because they couldn't go any further, so then they spread
Any
out
other
all
ideas,
good.
questions?
No, I think we get the idea.
So the last thing that I want to explain is bats come down here to hibernate every winter, and we really appreciate our bat neighbors because they help keep disease down by eating insects that spread disease. So the bats are super important to us, and unfortunately they're doing very poorly because of white nose syndrome. Have you heard about this?
It's kind of a mold, isn't it?
It's a fungal disease, yeah. So it spreads basically by people going underground and then going underground again someplace else because it spreads from underground cavern to underground cavern. So that's very sad. We hate to see it, and unfortunately it's causing a lot of bats to die. So since the fungus is found here, we ask that you wipe your feet across the mat at the top of the stairs when we go. It's very much the least we can do. We're going to look for a better solution to actually disinfect, but the awareness is part of it. But that's one of the things that's really bad. We are starting to see some hopeful science saying that some bats are growing, resistant to white nose syndrome, so that's very encouraging. But it's a bummer because bats are so important. Very cool.
Yep.
Let's keep working our way out here.
Very easy to work with, because it's so soft. Yeah. Pretty close by though, yeah, down there, and, yeah, much of it's like, you guys come down from Manchester, you're right next to Portland, much of Manhattan, brownstone came from Portland. Yeah. So we're gonna follow the Yellow Brick Road down here, and we're, going to, this is where the prisoners, the miners would have gone down and just follow this along, until they, eventually got to the water table. And
Sorry?
I see daylight.
Yeah,
Imagine how the folks come out of here and see the daylight.
we're gonna wipe our feet across the mat here. But yeah, what a juxtaposition, right? Like that and then this beautiful setting. Thank you very much for taking me.
Thank you. Thanks.
Certainly. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Come and check in.
No, I liked it better than I wasn't going. I was usually go. No, it wasn't. No, it was fine. But I just wasn't going deep.
It wasn't as low as you think.
Yeah.